Greetings, good evening. We have a few questions have come in. The first question tonight. Dear Ajahn, I have noticed that monasteries have different levels of discipline. Some have strict standards and others are more laid back. Obviously, strict monasteries would benefit someone without discipline. Can a more relaxed monastery or atmosphere be of more benefit for someone who is hard on themselves? I think it's hard to generalize, isn't it? There's many factors which will make a monastery conducive to someone for study and practice. The bottom line as a Buddhist monastic is we have what we call the Vinaya, the monastic discipline, the rules, the Patimokkha rules. But as soon as you start studying the Vinaya, you'll realize the Patimokkha is only the center of it, but it's not the entirety of it. There's many other mostly minor rules and practices, training rules to be done that go beyond or outside of the Patimokkha. And much of our forest tradition, say this is a forest monastery, the forest tradition emphasizes many of these other training practices, what we call Kawat, rules, regulations. For example, the way we attend to senior monks, look after them, the way we look after the buildings and the grounds, the way we receive and relate to visiting monks and so on. There's a whole set of practices that we've inherited from ancient times, but Luang Por Chah in particular emphasized these practices as good ways to train in the Vinaya and in mindfulness and for cultivating harmony in the Sangha. So, that's just what we call the Vinaya. Whether you call the monastery strict or not, really that's the standard. Doesn't matter. I mean, there's a certain amount of the atmosphere in the monastery may be set by individual monks, maybe, but that doesn't change the Vinaya, does it? So the rules of training are there to be observed. If you are aiming for Nibbana, then, as Ajahn Chah used to say, even the smallest rule becomes important. You don't want to start setting aside Vinaya training rules, monastic training rules, because you feel they're too strict or you feel they don't apply, because you could be in your inexperience, if you're new to the Dhamma practice, you might well not be in a position to really judge that and know, this is useful for the practice, this is not. So Ajahn Chah encouraged us to just take on all the rules and try to work with them and accept them and use them as ways of training the mind. So maybe one thing that will come up when you're keeping the monastic training rules is resistance, because as a layperson we tend to have very limited personal discipline, certainly not all the rules that you would keep in a monastery. So then often people's first reaction in a monastery is, aren't there a lot of rules, do's and don'ts? And some people find this frustrating, difficult, challenging, and so on. Obviously, the dynamic between being too strict and hard on yourself and being too relaxed in the practice comes up for everyone at different times. So partly it will be in relation to the monastic discipline, the rules, the practices and training practices we do. Partly it's other things. So something like, for example, how much food you eat. People, especially in the beginning of their monastic training, will veer between eating a little too much, perhaps, and then go to a little too little, back and forth, until they learn what is the right amount for them. That may take some time as well. Another thing is your body changes as you get older, and that's another factor, things change. But there's no specific rule saying how much you can and can't eat. We have rules about how we should contemplate the food and how we should eat. So eat in silence, not making a mess, not looking disparagingly at our neighbours' eating habits, and so on. But there's no rule saying exactly how much food you can take. So that comes down to you, doesn't it? Even if you have a strict teacher or a relaxed teacher, in the end you make that decision how much food you eat or how much sleep you take and so on. Occasionally conditions can be such that you need to eat quickly, so you eat a bit less, or you have to get up early or stay up late. So occasionally these basic things are affected by the monastic routine or practices we do. But by and large, you're free to determine how much you eat, how much you sleep, how much you talk, and you get a lot of free time in a monastery as well. So how much you spend meditating or studying or doing other crafts or work, you still have quite a lot of freedoms. And how strict this teacher or the sangha or the monastery is only one factor. It can be a factor, but it's not the only factor in your life and how well you adjust to it and how things go. I'd say probably your faith and commitment to the training is number one, whether you're in a strict place or a less strict place. If you're not really very committed to the monastic training, you don't have much faith, much interest to learn, then that will be a big obstacle and probably mean you don't last that long in a monastery. Because you need something that will keep you going while you're learning the rules, learning the ways of meditation, learning to tame your own mind. Until you've got your own peace and insight from practice, and till your mental defilements have thinned out a bit, you need something. So certainly in the beginning you need some faith, some inspiration to keep going and be patient with your own mind. So if you don't have that, well, that will be a big factor whether you have a strict teacher or not. And another thing, because of the Vinaya, even if you have a very strict teacher or monastery has a strict interpretation of the Vinaya, and having said that, there's still plenty of room for individual character to come out, and your state of mind may vary. You may be quite at ease even with a strict monastery, or you may be very uptight in a very relaxed monastery. It's not always the externals that are affecting things, it's also your own internal mind, how much wisdom and understanding you have. To be honest, some people come into monasteries, they really don't understand what it's all about. They have their ideals and they want something, like they want enlightenment, they want to be free from suffering. But you look at how they behave, how they live, they're clearly not really practicing for that. It's more of just an ideal. Other people, you might say, are the more sort of invisible practitioners who just quietly get on with things, and maybe you can't really tell where their level of practice is, and yet they don't seem to make much trouble, they don't seem to complain or have many problems, and they just carry on quietly and maybe even get enlightened, who knows. So you get a range of people in a monastery. I often quote the story of the Anagarika who lived with Ajahn Chah for many years and just quietly got on with the chores he was assigned, did his meditation, learned the chanting, never bothered anyone, never complained. But Ajahn Chah never ordained him as a monk. And once or twice Ajahn Chah said, he doesn't need to ordain. His practice is steady. He knows what he's got to do. It's good enough. Sometimes people put too much on the rules and the outside, the externals of the practice, and they forget to look at their actual, what they're doing with their mind. And so sometimes even lay practitioners can be wiser and more peaceful than monks. Sometimes novices more wise and peaceful than monks. Sometimes junior monks can be more wise and peaceful than senior monks. But part of the monastic training is you give everyone a chance, and we don't sit around, or we're not aiming to sit around and judge each other, who's more advanced, who's more just a beginner, who knows more, who knows less. That is a human characteristic, to sort of compare, compete, because we have conceit and self-view. But a monastic training, and particularly Ajahn Chah's style of training, is very good at helping you to deal with that and set it aside. In a monastery, everyone has the same haircut, the same clothing, the same practices, same rules, and that doesn't change whether you're very old or young, or you're very wise and enlightened, or you're a newcomer. The rules are the same. So there's a certain universality to the practices, and they sort of level out a lot of people's obsession with personality and character. People still do have their different personalities, but it's not made into a big thing so much. You just have the ways of practice, the rules, and you follow along the best you can. If you read Ajahn Chah's biography, you can also see, sometimes he would have doubts about, the teacher. Is the teacher strict, or the teacher is lax? And he realized, in the end, looking at other people and how they practice, whether it's the whole sangha around you or just an individual, it can be a great form of delusion and distraction, and because you don't really know where someone else is at. They may seem very strict on the outside. Maybe they are, but maybe they're not. Maybe it's just a show. Or maybe they're very strict but still not very advanced in their practice. Or some people seem very relaxed. So like Ajahn Chah used to say, Luang Por Ginari, who was one of his teachers, I hardly ever see him sitting meditation or walking meditation. He just walks for a few steps and then goes off and sweeps some leaves or sews some robes. Does that mean he just can't practice? Or what was more likely is that he could practice very well and didn't need to do a lot of formal sitting and walking meditation. Ajahn Chah hadn't yet fully realized that. So one day Luang Por Ginari explained to Ajahn Chah, your teacher may not seem to do much sitting and walking meditation, but maybe that's because their mind is already well trained, well developed, and they don't need to do that. So sometimes we spend too much time looking at others, who's better than, who's worse, who's strict, who's lax, and we get it wrong. So be careful. We can learn from others. Some monks will be very good in their practice and a good example, and that can be helpful, but not always. We also have to get to know ourselves. So, I think you have to consider this question for yourself. With maybe you try a few different monasteries, which one's strict, which one's relaxed, which one you feel peaceful in, comfortable in. See how you go, but you have to give it time as well. You can't really judge on a week or two's staying in a monastery. You really need to live in a monastery maybe for a year or two before you can see whether it's really conducive to you or not. Dear Luang Por, I hope you are well and in good health, so that we may benefit from your teachings for a long time to come. Recently I went for what was meant to be a simple outpatient procedure because I had to fast and because of the other medications, my glucose and blood pressure fell to dangerously low levels. Because of this, I suddenly felt like I was dying. I truly thought, this is my last moment. I remained calm during the whole ordeal. I found refuge in all my previous practice until that moment. My sense perception dimmed to a point of not clearly perceiving my surroundings, but I was completely aware. My sense of knowing and consciousness was completely present. A soft pinkish light filled the whole field of perception. I could still faintly hear and even speak, but I felt somehow disconnected to my body. Only the mind and objects of mind remained. I tried meditating, focusing on the breath, but the breath was almost imperceptible. Instead, I decided to focus on my awareness, the sense of knowing, but a powerful sense of craving became the center of all my attention, and thoughts about loved ones surged, but one by one subsided as I maintained my focus on my awareness. When my mind grew calm, a curious phenomena appeared. Disembodied voices like independent entities discussing familiar work and business plans started to appear, and they became persistent. I felt I had no control over them. In my perception, they seemed to be completely different people. This state persisted for a while, and almost an hour later, I started to recover from the episode and subsequently reached the surgical center where the medical personnel helped me to get a normal state. I hesitate to trouble you with this story. I thought it was too personal and maybe more appropriate to a more intimate disclosure, but while I was writing it, a thought came to me and told me about the voices I heard. This is becoming. And this is one of the strong reasons I'm writing to you about it. In all years of meditation, I've never experienced the mind and its concomitants in such a way that could see them as a separate phenomena, that they are the same or a single factor. And my question is, how can we practice to realize this phenomena before dying and be prepared for the moment of death if this one comes sooner than we expected? Please accept my sincere and humble respects. It's a long one. Sounds like you're basically doing the right thing, trying to maintain your awareness, even though physically you're undergoing a lot of changes in your body and perception because of, I guess, blood pressure and blood sugar issues and so on. So yeah, number one, maintain the awareness, as much mindfulness, self-awareness as you can at those times. So I know other people have had described sort of similar experiences, and chanting is a very common one, because trying to maintain awareness, say on the breath, if you're becoming very weak or dizzy or blanking out or whatever, often it's quite hard. Unless you've been doing it for many years, perhaps you can maintain mindfulness of breathing, but chanting is often something you can focus your mind on when facing health crises and problems like this. Chanting, and they sometimes suggest even chanting out loud, quite loud, to hold your attention, keep awareness, stop you blanking out, going unconscious, just to keep you right there. And I've talked to doctors and people, and they often say, yeah, that might be quite a good thing to do. The people around you, if you've got healthcare professionals around you, well, they know you're still aware if you're chanting. So when you stop is when there's a problem, because they don't know what's going on. So chanting can be good for maintaining awareness, or any other meditation object can be good. As I said, if you've been doing it a long time, many years perhaps, then quite often at those moments your mind naturally gathers together in samadhi. It goes to the meditation object. And I know one or two monks who have had these kind of problems with different illnesses and even going unconscious, and they always say they go to the samadhi that they've developed before until they blank out, and there's nothing you can do then, but at least on the way to becoming unconscious they maintain mindfulness. So I would generally aim for that. Maintaining mindfulness allows you to maintain equanimity, detached awareness. So even if you're in pain or experiencing something totally unusual or new, it helps you just to watch and observe with equanimity. Not to go into fear, not to desire things, want things, not to get stressed about what's going on, but just to know, oh, this is happening, and keep that awareness going as best you can. This is becoming, is what you wrote also. Well, maybe just the desire to live. If you think you may be dying, then there may well be strong desire to live come up in your mind, which you call becoming, which probably is becoming, the desire for life, or the desire for certain states of mind. So you may have the desire for a wholesome, peaceful state of mind, even if you think you're dying. Many people who have studied, practiced Buddhism will want to maintain a wholesome mind state, not go to fear, anxiety, anguish, regret. So you could say, well, that's becoming, and it may become the basis for your next birth as well, but at least it's a wholesome becoming in a wholesome state. Sometimes it happens automatically again. Your mind you may not be skilled in samadhi, but you can recollect teachings or good things you've done, good things you've witnessed and seen in your life. Can bring a lot of peace and happiness at that time where you think you're dying. Whether you die or not, that's another question. But recollect wholesome things, recollect the Buddha is another thing you can do. And try to let go of the negative mind states, the anguish, the greed, the desire, the worries, concerns about other people and all those sort of things. Your aim would probably be to let go of those. So maybe this is a wake-up call for you. If you've had some kind of health episode like this, luckily you didn't die, you didn't succumb, but it's a wake-up call, isn't it? It's saying life is fragile, things can change very quickly, death is only around the corner. Therefore, practice a lot. Do more meditation, listen to the Dhamma, do more good for yourself, more good for others, because you don't know how long you've got. And really train your mind. So many monks I've lived with, including myself, use the recollection of death to bring a sense of urgency to the practice, to try harder, to maintain mindfulness, develop mindfulness, to let go of unwholesome mental states. Because you don't know how much chance you have to do this. This could be the last day of your life, or you may have 20, 30, 40, 50 years to go, who knows, but you never know, do you? Another question. Dear Lumpur, why does it take so long to experience results from our meditation? A few different ways to answer this, I guess. Maybe it doesn't take long, it's just you're in a hurry, so it seems long. Like the kids wanting to get to their destination when they're going with their parents in a car. How slow, how long it seems to be to train this mind, well, partly that may be that perception and that way of thinking is conditioned by strong desire for results, and that may be quite a worldly thing. Even though you're practicing Dhamma, you may still have these sort of more worldly ways of looking at your practice. So it's very common, especially for new people, they measure everything. So you say, I've been meditating for 3 weeks now, I expect to see something, or I can sit meditation for a whole hour without moving. Surely I should be gaining samadhi by now. Or people come and stay in a monastery and they say, I've been 3 days already. Perhaps I should be enlightened already. And we love to hear stories about people getting quick results. And because we do have those stories, either from the time of the Buddha, where people seemingly got enlightened just like that, or even in the modern era, some of the forest ajahns that I've met or heard about, I think the record is 4 years for enlightenment, from ordaining to becoming enlightened. So 4 years doesn't sound very long. So off you go, hoping for something within 4 years. So after 10 or 20 years you haven't done it, you might feel a bit disappointed. But that's probably because you're attaching to this idea, 4 years is all I need. So generally we say just set aside too much concern and attachment to ideas of time. Could be this life, could be next life, who knows how long. More focus on the causes for good results in your practice, which is the path of practice that we do. Your precepts, are you keeping the precepts? Are you understanding how to use precepts to train your mind? Are you letting go of mental defilements? Are you increasing your mental defilements, in the way you go about your life, your lifestyle, how you spend your time, how you relate to the world, other people, material things? Also, you could say, well, how much meditation are you doing? How much do you listen to the Dhamma? They can give you some kind of guideline to why your progress or lack of progress is why it is. But really the heart of the Dhamma practice is the present moment, isn't it? It's bringing your attention back to the present moment, where you're dropping the past and ideas of the past, you're dropping the future and all your expectations and hopes. You're just focusing on the present moment, because that's where you have to establish mindfulness, reflect and let go of mental defilements. You can only do it as they're arising. You can gain a little bit by reflecting on past experiences, of course. You can make some plans for the future, of course, but they're not going to actually remove defilements, greed, anger and delusion and all their offshoots from your mind. Only mindfulness and wisdom in the present moment can do that. So that is where we have to aim for, right here, right now, present moment. And the more you do that, the sense of timelessness becomes clearer to you. As we chant, the Dhamma, we chanted it just now, Dhamma is akaliko, it's timeless. And we have to get out of that old habit of always saying, oh well, I'll do it for 6 months and then this and then that, all our plans. And some people have their next year all mapped out, where they'll be, what they're going to do, how much they're going to practice. I mean, you can do that, but you're falling into a trap that will lead you into disappointment easily, and maybe even giving up the practice. If you get into a better habit of coming back to the present moment as much as possible, you become more aware. You have more chance of abandoning unwholesome states, cultivating wholesome states. And whenever your mind does settle down, there's more consistent mindfulness, more samadhi. One of the sort of things you feel is, there's a great timelessness to it. You're not thinking about this year, next year, last year. Your mind is in the present moment because you're mindful. Then you say, of course, this is what I should have been doing all along. All that sitting there judging my practice, it's too slow and I should have done more and that's not right. All that disappears because of the presence of mindfulness and the insight that's functioning and letting go. And you have this sense of, I should have done this before. Why didn't I do this before? So, try to come back to the present moment as much as possible, and this will help you deal with the question of how long, how short, how quick, how slow. The last question is in Thai, so I'll read it in Thai first and then translate. หลวงพ่อคะเดี๋ยวนี้โยมมักจะมีอารมณ์เฉยๆไม่ค่อยไปยึดทุกข์หรือยึดสุขมากเหมือนแต่ก่อนโดยเฉพาะอารมณ์สุขทั้งที่ลูกได้งานใหม่เงินเดือนเพิ่มขึ้นแต่โยมกลับรู้สึกเฉยๆมีคนให้ของขวัญเยอะแยะโยมก็รู้สึกเฉยๆไม่ได้ดีใจมากมายเหมือนเมื่อก่อนและโดยเฉพาะเวลานี้มีคนมาชมโยมว่าโยมเป็นคนดีปฏิบัติดีโยมก็ไม่ได้ดีใจเหมือนก่อนแต่โยมกลับรู้สึกละอายนิดๆเพราะลูกก็รู้ว่าลูกไม่ได้ดีแบบที่เขาชมเรายังมีกิเลสอยู่มันซ้อนอยู่แค่ยังไม่ได้แสดงออกมาต่อหน้าเขาโยมสังเกตว่าตัวเองเห็นกิเลสของตัวเองชัดขึ้นโดยเฉพาะเวลามีอารมณ์โลภโกรธหรืออิจฉาแต่มันก็จะวางได้เร็วขึ้นอยู่ไม่เคยไปปรุงแต่งมากเหมือนแต่ก่อนจริงๆเราควรมีความสุขมากขึ้นแล้วมีทุกข์น้อยลงหรือเปล่าค่ะหลวงพ่อ So the answer in Thai is ก็ธรรมดานะเราปฏิบัติมากขึ้นฝึกสติฝึกปัญญาพิจารณาธรรมมากขึ้นฟังธรรมเข้าใจในธรรมมากขึ้นศีลก็ตั้งมั่นมากขึ้นอันที่สองก็คือจิตจะอยู่เป็นกลางมากขึ้นและในช่วงแรกเราอาจจะไม่ค่อยเรารู้สึกอันนี้เป็นของใหม่ความรู้สึกที่เป็นกลางๆหรือที่เราเรียกเฉยๆเป็นอุเบกขาเป็นกลางเป็นของใหม่แต่ก่อนเราก็ยึดความสุขว่าเป็นสิ่งที่เราต้องการแต่อันนี้มักจะเป็นกามสุขความสุขทางโลกให้มีคนมาชมเรารักสิ่งที่สวยงามรักความรู้สึกสุขกายสุขใจต่างๆตอนนี้ความสุขเกิดจากจิตใจที่สงบเป็นกลางๆมีสติมีปัญญาด้วยก็เลยคุณค่าของเราวิธีมองโลกก็ต้องเปลี่ยนไปอันนี้ใช้เวลาหน่อยแต่ไม่ใช่ว่าสิ่งที่ไม่ดีนะเรารู้สึกเฉยๆก็คงเกิดจากการปฏิบัติของเราฝึกสติฝึกปัญญารู้เท่าทันความจริงมากขึ้นเหมือนที่ว่าเราคิดปรุงแต่งน้อยลงบางทีเราก็โดนเจอสิ่งที่ทำให้เราทุกข์บางทีก็ยังเจอสิ่งที่ทำให้เราสุขแต่ว่าเราก็ต้องพยายามรักษาสติแล้วก็พิจารณาเสมอสุขทุกข์ก็ไม่ใช่ของใครก็เป็นสิ่งที่เกิดตามธรรมชาติเกิดขึ้นแล้วดับลงไปเป็นธรรมดาคือเราหัดฝึกสติทุกวันสติอยู่ในศีลสติอยู่ในสมาธิสติกับปัญญาทุกวันจะได้พิจารณาละอารมณ์ต่างๆละความฟุ้งซ่านต่างๆไปเรื่อยๆให้อดทนแล้วก็มีความเพียรแล้วก็ทำไปเรื่อยๆถึงบางครั้งเรารู้สึกละกิเลสได้เร็วบางครั้งอาจจะรู้สึกละช้าไม่เป็นไรทำไป ก็อนุโมทนาที่โยมปฏิบัติมานะ So just a summary of this question is mainly talking about how this practitioner's experience of the Dhamma and of their mind has changed over the years because practicing keeping precepts, meditating, developing mindfulness, listening to the Dhamma, their understanding has slowly changed, and they're experiencing a lot more equanimity towards different experiences in life. Their mind is more in the middle. They said that before they'd get really high when people praised them and things went well and they got what they wanted, and then when things went badly and people criticized them, they'd be very depressed or annoyed. They had much more stronger displays of mental defilement. But having practiced now more and more, the defilements are still there, but they're a little thinner, a little less prominent in their thinking, so they have less extreme emotional responses to things. They're more calm, more steady. But sometimes they have a doubt: is that the right way to practice? Because the previous conditioning is one to go to extremes. Always look for excitement and pleasure of different kinds, and always to try and run away from any kind of pain or boring experiences or painful experiences. So there were, in the past, there's all these extreme emotions were much more prominent in their experience, whereas now they say they're feeling much more ordinary. Sometimes they use the word indifferent, but I would say it's probably coming from the practice of Dhamma, practicing mindfulness, reflecting on things, reflecting on the impermanent nature of our mind and moods, the impermanent nature of feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, and the impermanent changing nature of the world. The more you see that with mindfulness and reflection, the result is you gain more equanimity, and equanimity is just keeping your mind more in the middle and knowing things but without going to the extremes of emotions. I think that's just quite a natural result of the practice. And also when you're more mindful, you're more honest, in the sense, because you're not trying to delude yourself so much as maybe previously. Maybe somebody praises you, but what they say is not really justified. You still have some bad habits or bad qualities. So then inside, even though they may praise you on the outside, on the inside where you're at. And sometimes praise is justified or true, but sometimes it's not. But you don't crave it so much. You just listen to the words of others, and sometimes this is correct, sometimes it's not. And you're not attaching to that so much. So generally, I think this person is describing their development of particularly the practice of mindfulness and their ability to see things as Dhamma rather than just always following emotion. So it's a good thing. But it also means you have to adjust your expectations and adjust this new experience because it's new. And people who have never meditated often are very attached to extremes, highs and lows. As you meditate, there's this often you find your mind evens out a lot more. So it's just something to learn from, observe in yourself. Nothing to be alarmed by, I don't think. So that's the end of tonight's questions. We'll leave it there.